Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado, and I hope you're doing well. With so many horrific and tragic accidents we've seen on Colorado's roads recently, when this article popped up, I thought it was really interesting because it's part of a bigger story, right? We have some serious issues in Colorado. I would consider us a sanctuary state for illegal immigrants. And of course, a big part of that is driver's licenses. I'll get into that in a minute here, but let's start off with this article from December 1st, 2025 at the Colorado Sun and kind of go from there. Colorado is auditing 1,745 licenses for immigrants driving 18 wheelers, hazardous trucks, and buses. The state paused its commercial driver's license program for immigrants with temporary legal status after a new Trump administration rule. ColoradoSun.com, of course, all the links at Free State, Colorado from Jennifer Brown, December 1st, 2025. Of the 126,525 people in Colorado licensed to drive 18 wheelers, school buses, and trucks carrying hazardous materials, 1,745 are immigrants who do not have permanent legal status to live in the United States. That number won't rise anytime soon, if ever. Colorado paused new licenses and renewals for immigrants without citizenship or green cards after the Trump administration announced, quote, emergency action in September to drastically restrict who is eligible for commercial driver's licenses. The new restrictions include refugees, asylum seekers, and people protected by DACA or deferred action for child arrivals. The Colorado Department of Revenue added a bright yellow notice at the top of its website this fall saying that commercials driver's licenses for what are called, quote, non domiciled residents were on hold until further notice. After a request from the Colorado Sun, the department released the current number of active commercial driver's licenses for foreign nationals with temporary lawful status, but said it could not provide a time frame when those licenses were given or how many were received in the past few months. The federal policy change, which followed a deadly truck crash in Florida involving a driver from India who made an illegal U turn, has advocates nationwide concerned about the financial impact on immigrants who sought careers as truck drivers. Now, so interesting. The Colorado Sun has some good articles out there, a lot of good information. But of course, you can kind of see some of their bias, at least in my opinion, right? The first thing they want to talk about is not the safety of people on the roads, but is the financial impact on immigrants. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against immigrants who are following the process, doing everything legally, and nothing should be preventing them from working as they're supposed to. But nonetheless, there are bigger issues at play here in Colorado for sure. The article continues on talking about some of the requirements Colorado has, some of the different companies out there, and of course, what the federal government is doing. So interesting stuff for sure. Here's what the Colorado Department of Revenue, the Division of Motor Vehicles, has on their website, this big banner that they were talking about at the Colorado Sun. Due to new federal regulations issued by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, effective Monday, September 29th, 2025, the Colorado DMV has paused the issuance and renewals of term limited. So here's that quote here. This is the big phrase non domiciled commercial driver's licenses, CDLs, and commercial learner's permits until further notice. Now, like I said earlier, in Colorado, you can get a driver's license by not being here in the country illegally. I'm going to show you that bill here in a minute that just changed in this last year. But nonetheless, interesting stuff for sure. We just had this happen just a couple weeks ago, really about a month ago now. This is over at truckdrivers.life. Driver identified as 23-year-old Sukhpriyat Singh from New York in fatal Wolf Creek Pass crash. Now, I don't have a lot of information on this. There's not a ton of information out there, but I did see over here that the American Truckers, which is a kind of a lobby or interest group that's all across the country, American Truckers United, advocating against illegal immigration in the trucking industry, 46,000 followers. They said that this guy was a non-domicile truck driver, which I could believe because unfortunately this horrific tragedy. Don't get me wrong, not to downplay that, but there was a GoFundMe to send him back to India to send his body back there for his family. So it makes me think that maybe he is a non-U.S. citizen at that point, right? But authorities have identified the truck driver killed in last week's Wolf Creek Pass crash as Sukhpriyat Singh, a 23-year-old from New York, originally from India. According to the Colorado State Patrol, Singh was driving a Freightliner semi-truck hauling canned goods on Highway 160 near Pagosa Springs when a vehicle lost control on the steep descent and plunged down a mountainside on November 3rd. Horrible. Troopers say the truck was traveling at excessive speed, and witnesses reported smoke coming from the brakes moments before the crash. Singh did not use a nearby runaway truck ramp, which is horrible, right? They have these truck ramps there, 1.5 miles from the site. So he passed this, and then 1.5 miles later has this horrible accident. The semi crashed through the guardrail and tumbled down the embankment, completely destroying the cab and trailer. So, I mean, if this is accurate that this guy was a non domicile truck driver, this is exactly what the Trump administration is trying to prevent, is what it seems to me, especially if maybe for some individuals out there who don't speak English or have English as their first language and maybe can't read those signs about the truck ramps, the runaway ramps, things like that. Fox21news.com had an article about this accident as well, back from November 5th, 2025 is when it was updated. Driver dies after rolling semi-truck off Wolf Creek Pass. I thought it was interesting. They identify him as just a 23-year-old. They don't mention his name whatsoever. And, that could have been out of respect for his family. But sometimes, when the media doesn't mention somebody's name, you have to wonder, are they trying to kind of shape that narrative a little bit? Not to sound too suspicious, folks, but I mean, you've seen the media here in Colorado act to do a lot of things to try and control the narrative. So I wouldn't be shocked. Here's another one from America Truckers. Thought this was interesting. You may remember this story. This was from July 2nd. Truck that killed 3 in Colorado was operated, and there's a U.S. Department of Transportation number here. US.3321198. That US dot number has violations that include English proficiency violations, licensing violations, and more. This crash warrants further investigation for this family. 3 killed, including 2 children in eastern Colorado I-70 crash. I mean, again, horrific, horrible tragedies. But, makes me think that maybe there's more of this going on in Colorado than we're being let on. I mean, if we have this guy up at Wolf Creek Pass, over on I-70, these events aren't too far apart where maybe we have some people out there who shouldn't be on the roads necessarily driving these big semi trucks, right? So this is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. This is the Transportation Secretary. This is the official announcement from September 26, 2025. New rule closes dangerous loopholes, holds states accountable, and launches immediate enforcement action against California for gross negligence. Now, of course, I see California in there, and I got to think Colorado's probably not far behind. I hate even thinking that, but that's the reality of it. It says U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean P. Duffy today announced an emergency action to drastically restrict who's eligible for a non-domiciled commercial learner's permits and commercial driver's licenses, CDL. The rule, effective immediately, comes in response to the ongoing nationwide audit by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, and the recent series of horrific fatal crashes caused by non-domiciled drivers. The audit has uncovered both a catastrophic pattern of states issuing licenses illegally to foreign drivers, as well as the fact that even if the current regulatory framework is followed, it can fail. The confluence of these two factors have created an imminent hazard on America's roadways that must be fixed. Now, I mean, the Colorado Sun had an article referencing this, talking about this situation and how it relates to us here in Colorado. They don't talk about what the federal government found in their audit. They don't dig into that at all in terms of driver's licenses being issued illegally to foreign drivers. I think that's an important part of the story that the Colorado Sun is leaving out. And that's part of the reason I want to do these videos. And thank you for watching. Moving forward, non-citizens will not be eligible for a non-domiciled CDL unless they meet a much stricter set of rules, including an employment-based visa and undergoing a mandatory federal immigration status check using the SAVE system. Gosh, I'm sure the Colorado government is not going to be happy with that, right? Quote, what our team has discovered should disturb and anger every American, said U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean P. Duffy. Licenses to operate a massive 80,000-pound truck are being issued to dangerous foreign drivers, oftentimes illegally. This is a direct threat to the safety of every family on the road, and I won't stand for it. Today's actions will prevent unsafe foreign drivers from renewing their licenses and hold states accountable to immediately invalidate improperly issued licenses. FMCSA's nationwide audit, non-domiciled CDLs uncovered systemic noncompliance across several states, the worst and most egregious in California. Due to weak oversight, insufficient training, and programming errors, the agency found a large number of non-domiciled CDLs were issued to, quote, drivers who were ineligible, drivers whose licenses were valid long after their lawful presence in the U.S. expired. In California alone, more than 25% of non-domiciled CDLs reviewed were improperly issued. I mean, that's a lot, folks. Not saying that's the case here in Colorado, but nonetheless, you got to question, you got to wonder. And this should have been part of the story on the Colorado Sun page, of course, as I said earlier. But you can read through this yourself. Of course, links at Free State Colorado. Thought it was really interesting. They did put out this one sheeter, they call it. It's really 3 pages long, but kind of going over the details here of who's eligible to get one of these non-domiciled commercial driver's licenses, and kind of go through some of the examples here where California has totally failed. So it makes you question what we're doing here in Colorado, just because we we follow so much of what California does. Thought this was interesting as well. Our neighbors to the north up in Wyoming, a really interesting article from November 24th, 2025 over at cowboystatedaily.com. ICE to deport 40 truckers after Wyoming Sheriff Highway Patrol operation. Now just think of this, folks. I mean, we know now, according to the federal government, 25% of California CDL drivers who are non-domiciled were issued improperly, shouldn't have them. Well, you can guarantee that some of those people are going through Colorado, right? I mean, if you're coming from California, going out east, you might be going to Colorado. There's a good chance of it, right? And then we got up in Wyoming, which, think of I-25. A lot of these people are probably Wyoming to Colorado and around that area, right? So check this out. After truckers complained of illegal counterparts, Wyoming law enforcement ICE conducted an operation last week targeting truckers bypassing the port of entry near the Colorado border. From about 205 contacts, 40 truckers are set to be deported. That is a lot. 40 people to be deported out of the 205 that they checked. Huge numbers there. Now, you got to remember too, folks, this is a Wyoming Highway State Patrol cooperating with federal immigration enforcement, ICE. If Colorado state troopers tried to cooperate with ICE in this regard, they would be punished by our attorney general. They would be sued. They'd probably be fired. They could be facing a lot of penalties. What they're doing in Wyoming is illegal for law enforcement in Colorado to do, and that is to work with federal immigration law enforcement to try and get people who are not supposed to be driving these big trucks out of the country, right? Just a little bit of the article here. Laramie County Sheriff's Office, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Wyoming Highway Patrol collaborated on a 3-day operation last week targeting commercial truck drivers on county roads, leading to 40 pending deportations, authorities say. And you just got to wonder how many of those drivers were from Colorado, right? Laramie County Sheriff Brian Kozak made the first public statement about the operation in a Friday video post to the agency's Facebook page, which he said he took, quote, at one of our hardworking points of entry. Kozak said his office, ICE, and Wyoming Highway Patrol collaborated, illegal in Colorado, for 3 days in Laramie County, specifically targeting commercial drivers who use county roads to avoid the port of entry. They performed 195 traffic stops. During those stops, Wyoming Highway Patrol conducted 133 commercial vehicle inspections, placing 44 trucks and 38 drivers out of service. Wow. 40 illegal aliens were in custody Friday awaiting deportation, Kozak added. One of them, he said, had been convicted of sexual assault and deported twice prior. Yikes. Another had DUI and larceny convictions and had been deported 5 times, said the sheriff. Wow. Other truckers reported them. Kozak told Cowboy State Daily in a Monday phone interview that the agency's plan to the operation because lawfully operating truck drivers had been complaining about their undocumented peers sidestepping the ports of entry in the pre-dawn hours. Very interesting stuff here, folks, to think that 1/5 of all encounters, as the article states here, 40 out of about 205, prompt to deportation proceedings is quite a bit. But just interesting to see what's happening in Wyoming. Obviously, California getting busted by the federal government, and just makes you wonder what's going on here in Colorado. At least it makes me wonder too. So here's an article here from earlier this year, March 31st, 2025, to kind of give us some idea about some of the unfortunate things here in Colorado. You may remember this story from last year and earlier this year, of course. Colorado widow pushing for trucking industry changes kept ICE informed about release of driver responsible for her husband's death. Now, how horrific is this, folks? A Colorado woman whose life was turned upside down last year when her husband died in a crash is pushing for change and keeping federal agents up to date on the status of a man who is responsible for her husband's death. Now, this was the Jefferson County District Attorney. I did a video on this last year. Of course, that Jeffco DA was supported by George Soros. It's the reality of it. Here's the guy who killed this poor man. Ignacio Cruz Mendoza was sentenced to 364 days in jail. That's why there was a lot of outcry at the DA, because this guy literally killed somebody on the road and got less than a year in jail. Crazy. For a deadly crash he caused along Highway 285 last June, so that was June 2024. Over the weekend, after 293 days of his sentence, he was released from the Jefferson County Jail. He is now in the custody of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Dean Miller said she got a life sentence the day her husband Scott died in that crash. I'm without my best friend, my soulmate. My daughter is without her father. My grandkids don't have a grandpa, and his friends are lost without him, Dean Miller said. It's all senseless. Scott Miller was killed when the steel piping on the semi truck Cruz Mendoza was driving came loose after he lost control of his truck. Initially, Cruz Mendoza was charged with a misdemeanor traffic offense and pleaded guilty before prosecutors could file additional charges. An investigation revealed Cruz Mendoza was undocumented, had been removed from the country more than a dozen times, and did not have a valid commercial driver's license, which is crazy. How is this guy driving a semi truck without a commercial driver's license? Miller says there's this poor woman here, Deanna Miller. Miller says that not wanting him behind the wheel of another truck, she notified immigration. Quote, the person that we had contacted said that they would make sure that Ignacio was picked up. And then on Friday, I contacted them again to make sure because he has no remorse for killing my husband. I mean, how crazy is this, right? Like this lady can't even rely on law enforcement here in Colorado working with the federal government to get this guy out of the country who got a slap on the wrist after killing her husband. I mean, that's the state of affairs here in Colorado, folks. This poor woman without her husband now, who was killed on the roads by somebody who was in the country illegally, who did not have a valid CDL. He gets less than a year in prison, and if she didn't stay up with ICE, who knows if he would have actually been deported, because we know our local law enforcement is not willing or legally allowed to work with federal law enforcement to get people like this out of the country. I mean, it's insane, folks. You can't make this up. So she goes through some of the story there. There's her husband who unfortunately had passed away. Horrible stuff. Here's ICE's post from this is going to be back in April 2025. ICE Denver officers removed Ignacio Cruz Mendoza, a criminal alien, to Mexico on April 16th. Cruz has past convictions for DUI, possession of drugs, careless driving resulting death, and careless driving resulting in injury. He has been removed or voluntarily returned to Mexico at least 16 times. And that's the thing, folks. Like all these people who are supporting open borders, this guy commits a crime, causes the death of people, gets deported, and then he can come back in. That's why securing the border is so important to so many people. That's for sure. Here's when he was arrested on March 31st as well. And what's interesting too is the company that he was working with. So this trucking company in wreck with deported driver had history of employing unlicensed drivers. This is cdllife.com. This is from June 18th, 2024. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you there. It says the trucking company who employed a previously deported truck driver recently involved in a fatal wreck in Colorado had a history of ELD, that's electronic tracking devices, violations, and hiring unlicensed drivers, investigators found. So you have to wonder, this is one of those California companies out there who maybe the federal government's cracking down on, why there's such a huge issue here. The June 11th wreck near Aspen Park, Colorado, caused a 47-year-old truck driver, Ignacio Cruz Mendoza, to overturn in his rig, spilling a load of metal pipes that killed 64-year-old motorist Scott Miller and seriously injured another. Now, the release of Cruz Mendoza's arrest affidavit and investigation into the trucking company who employed him have revealed new details about the incident. He left Cheyenne around 10 a.m. in the morning, was driving here and had that accident. This was what's interesting, though. An investigation into the trucking company Cruz Mendoza was working for, Monique Trucking LLC, revealed that the company had 4 previous violations rated to ELDs and 3 previous violations for their drivers not possessing commercial driver's licenses. A statement from ICE Denver indicates that he was arrested, and yeah, it's this article. But yeah, I mean, you have these companies out there like Mendoza Trucking LLC, which has since been shut down here in Colorado or here in California. You can see FMCSA orders California Trucking Company to shut down after deadly crash. This is from July 8th, 2024. So at least there was a little bit of accountability. And this is that Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the one that's really pausing everything nationwide that's having the effect here in Colorado. But there's Colorado connections here, folks. They ordered this trucking company with a history of safety violations to cease operations after a crash in Colorado killed one person and injured others. So, I mean, they apparently hired this guy, is kind of how I'm reading it. That they hired him, didn't have a CDL, was in the country illegally, and then driving here in Colorado, kills somebody. Wow, horrible stuff, folks. And I still can't help but wonder how many people who are in the country illegally are driving on our roads. I mean, you think of all the accidents we're seeing these horrific headlines. So this bill in 24, this is our Colorado legislative website here, Senate Bill 24-182, made it easier for illegal immigrants to get their driver's licenses, the immigrant identification document issuance. So they repealed all these requirements that you have to have a Colorado income tax return, that you would have to demonstrate you are a resident for 2 years. They took away all these safeguards and protections. And this is how the law work or how these policies work, folks, too. So like, years ago, right? When Colorado first started giving a driver's license to illegal immigrants, they said, well, hey, they're already on the roads. Let's get them licensed, make sure they can get insurance, make sure, maybe they're on the farms and this and that. But we're going to put all these protections in place to ensure that they can't just show up, get a license, and then hit the road, right? They have to have a show that they've been in the state for 2 years. They have to have an income tax. They have to have a social security number or an individual taxpayer identification number. They have to have these things. They have to have some sort of current ID from their home country. That's how this bill got passed originally, right? And then in 2024, they say, no, the Democrat majority in our legislature says, no, let's change that. We're going to repeal all of those requirements. We're going to make it easier for people who are in the country illegally to get their driver's licenses. And guess what? They don't have to follow any of these rules anymore. They don't have to have a social security number. They don't have to have a current passport or ID. It can be expired for 10 years. They don't have to have an income tax. They don't have to have any of that. And of course, our governor, Jared Polis, signed this bill on June 5th, 2024. And you got the Senadora Julie Gonzalez, one of the worst we have in our state government, Senator Jeff Bridges, Representative Tim Hernandez, and Representative Elizabeth Valesco. Remember these names, folks. These are the people who are making it easier for illegal immigrants to get driver's licenses here in Colorado. And in my opinion, really turning us into an official sanctuary state in my mind. So you can look through and see who voted for this bill if you're interested. But of course, yes, Jared Polis signed the bill. Here's that official act and the changes to the law. And there's his name right there. Jared Polis signed right there. So interesting stuff. You can read the CPR news article back from June 2024 if you really want to dig into it about removing that 2-year waiting requirement and all of that. And you have to wonder, at least I wonder, right? Colorado, we rank number 2 for reckless driving deaths, the study found. Now, this was from May of 2025. And don't get me wrong, some of the data is a little old, but some of these issues have been going on for years, folks. I mean, that's the reality of it. We have decade-long problems here because of our Democrat majority in our state government who are making us so unsafe. And we just see stories and stories keep coming out. It's bad news, folks. It's bad news. And one of the most laughable things out there is you have Jared Polis, who's responsible for some of these policies, right? And then he came out with this plan on November 6th. Here's his press release talking about how Governor Polis is going to launch major Colorado action plan to increase public safety and lower our insurance costs, our car insurance costs. And it's one of the most laughable things you'll ever read because he's going to put more speed cameras is what he wants. I mean, more surveillance of our society. I don't like that. DUI checkpoints, fine. You can do that. That's not a bad thing, I suppose. Cracking down on auto theft, of course. Part of the reason auto theft got so bad is because of the policies of people like Jared Polis, and then they changed it, and he's celebrating that, of course. And yeah, the big thing here is we got to deal with the severe weather conditions. We have to have better notifications of hail damage, and that's what's gonna stop Colorado's insurance premiums from increasing. Absolutely laughable, folks. We have people in our state government who are making these problems worse. And I don't know if you saw this one. This is just from the other day here, and absolutely horrific. Make this a little bit bigger for you, but this is November 27th, 2025. This is down off, I believe, I-25 in York. It's made it really big so I can't see, but you see the semi truck there wreck into this. I mean, this big 18-wheeler, gosh, I imagine killing that driver. Absolutely horrific. I don't know all the details on this one, but I know the road got closed. We're seeing really bad traffic right now in Colorado, and you got to wonder, yeah, I-25 in Yale currently closed November 27th, 2025. Again, all the links at Free State Colorado that you can dig in and look. Something really close to me here in Greeley. This was from November 26th, 2025. Woman dies in Colorado 5 days after being struck by underage alleged drunk driver at over 100 miles per hour. Don't know all the details here. I've heard mixed things from people in the community, but really bad stuff. Eduardo Pera Corral driving a Ford Mustang going 100 miles an hour, wrecks into this lady here in Greeley and kills her. Horrible, horrible stuff. This poor 27-year-old woman, so young. And I looked up his arrest record here. This is the Weld County Sheriff's website here. You can see arrested on November 9th, 2025. Arrested. He drove without a valid driver's license. So he didn't have a driver's license. Possession or consumption of alcohol by a minor, and then the vehicle or assault DUI. You can actually click in and check his status there, which is interesting to see where he's at. Does say he's 19, does say he's white. I mean, a very Hispanic name. I'm not questioning that at this point. But nonetheless, he's in supervised custody, whatever that means. But horrible, horrible stuff, folks. Then this one just popped up here on December 2nd, 2025, over at theblaze.com. Illegal alien trucker accused of causing crash that killed newlyweds. So it's like you hear these stories every single day across our country and even here in Colorado. And then you see articles come out like The Sun that are maybe shining a little bit of light on it. And they leave out so many details. That's why I think it's so interesting. But we have to understand what we're dealing with here in Colorado. We have to understand the situation that we find ourselves in, folks, and we have to make some changes. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here if you've watched the video this long, but nonetheless, changes need to happen here in Colorado, and you can be a part of it, that's for sure. So, again, this is Brandon from Free State, Colorado. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.